Thank you for joining me once more as I continue with part 6 of my series, Cosmos on Trial. In our last lesson, we began examining what Neil taught on the show about the supposed 5 great catastrophes that allegedly happened over the last 500 million years. He focused on what is called the Permian period, which nearly destroyed all of life on Earth. Of course, he made claims about how trilobites lived in one period of time, dinosaurs in another, and then how humans evolved much later. In contrast to all that Neil said, I began showing that there was one great catastrophe in our history instead of 5, and it happened within the 6,000 or so years that the Earth has been in existence. Of course, that great catastrophe was the worldwide flood we learn about starting in Genesis chapter 6. Most believe that the flood caused the ice age that followed after it. I guess you could call the ice age a catastrophe as well, but I tend to lump it in with the flood since it caused it. One thing I want to clarify. When I say ice age, I'm not saying that the entire Earth was covered in ice. Instead, the Earth went from being warm all over to being covered around 30% in ice, as opposed to the 10% the Earth is covered in right now. In the last lesson, I did not have time to cover everything I wanted to. So I will continue in this lesson offering more proof of a worldwide flood, and I will focus more on the fossil record, which offers more proof that evolution is not true. Let's continue to examine more about the science of geology. Just as a quick reminder, geology involves the study of the history of the Earth's crust, rocks, and strata. Strata refers to the different layers that are found within the Earth's crust. If you look in any biology or geology textbook, you will find a diagram of a so-called geological column. The geological column is supposed to represent 12 different geological ages of life forms that have formed over millions of years. The lowest level is supposed to contain the most simplex creatures, and the further you move up the column, the more complex they become. But let me let you in on a little secret. This geological column does not exist anywhere on this earth. It only exists in these textbooks and the evolution's imagination. In fact, the deepest columns are less than a mile deep. The Grand Canyon is the deepest location. So there is a major flaw with the geological column. For example, if all the Earth's living creatures were stacked on top of each other that supposedly evolved over a time span of 2 billion years, it has been estimated that the depth would reach 130 miles. This is a major problem considering the Earth's crust is only 25 to 30 miles deep. What geologists do is they take layers here and there, and then they begin to combine them together on paper to put together the alleged geological column. Another major problem they have to deal with is the true geological record that we have today. The lowest level of fossils we have is called the Cambrian level. This is an amazing level because there are a great variety of organisms found there which indicate that all these life forms existed together at once, which is exactly what the Bible teaches. The truth of the matter is that every major invertebrate animal group has been found in this layer. The simplex and the complex are found together, which goes directly against what the evolutionists teach, because according to them, only the most simplex should be in this layer. The evolutionists struggle with giving a logical reason to why it seems like life just seemed to burst upon the scene in this first layer, and they cannot explain it. I believe the Bible holds the real answer of why this lower level contains so many different organisms, and that is the account of the flood in Genesis chapter 6 and 7. In order for something to become a fossil, it has to be covered quickly before it decays or gets eaten. Since there are so many different organisms in one place, The worldwide flood, as mentioned in the book of Genesis, would explain why so many creatures are preserved together. You can imagine as the water began to rise, the animals would run toward dry ground, which would put them all together in the same place and allow them to be overtaken by all that water. The fact that there are so many of these great graveyards across the globe indicate a worldwide flood. The water would quickly bury these creatures, giving them the ideal conditions that they need in order to become fossils. Also, every mountain on the face of the earth shows signs of being underwater at one point, which gives more evidence of the idea of there being a worldwide flood, just as the Word of God says it happened. Now, polystrate fossils offer strong evidence against the alleged geological column as well, because each layer of the column was supposed to be laid down over millions of years. Yet these polystrate fossils can be found all over the place, and they cross anywhere from 2 to 4 of these layers. Many of these polystrate fossils are trees that can be up to 20 feet in length, which are embedded across several layers. But there are other things like catfish, whales, and other plant life that can be seen all over the world that cross across several of these layers. The reason this offers strong evidence against eons of time for these layers is obvious. These trees and other organic things could not be fossilized slowly over millions of years while part of them was buried and the other part was exposed. No, they had to be fully covered at once. So using the layers in the earth to date the earth is not a reliable method. Surprisingly, even Neil pointed out that this method of dating is not reliable. I really want you to pay close attention to what I'm about to say, because it is devastating to the theory of evolution. We have around 250,000 different species preserved in fossils today. Out of all of these fossils, we would assume that if evolution were correct, we would find some of those half-formed creatures in the fossil record where they were evolving from one creature to another. However, not one single fossil has been found with half-formed features. Let me say that again. Not one single creature has been found with half-formed features. Charles Darwin understood how powerful this evidence was against evolution, because he confessed that this is the most serious objection which can be urged against the theory. Many evolutionists are hoping that someone will dig up at least one fossil they could point to as their missing link that they're looking for. There have been several fossils found over the years that were thought to be the missing link between man and ape, but every one of these supposed missing links have been disproven. Scientists will never find their missing links because the Bible makes it clear that one thing produces after its own kind in Genesis 1 and verse 11. Then God said, "Let the earth bring forth grass, the herb that yields seeds, and the fruit trees that yield fruits according to its kind, whose seed is in itself on the earth." And it was so. And the earth brought forth grass, the herb that yields seed according to its kind, and the tree that yields fruit, whose seed is in itself according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. This means that a tree will produce a tree, and a monkey will produce a monkey. We have never evolved from something else, and we are not in the process of evolving into something else. There are so many holes in the theory of evolution that it should not be taught. But evolutionists will continue to teach it because they are desperate to find a way that they can explain our existence without there being a God. Now I want to share with you some points made about geology from a website, teachingshearts.org, that shows that the study of geology cannot date the earth accurately because events like earthquakes, erupting volcanoes, floods, and weather events can drastically change the face of the earth, sometimes in hours that geologists would say would take millions or billions of years to do. Mount St. Helens eruption. The eruption of Mount St. Helens on March 18, 1980, created conditions in hours that scientists thought took millions of years to develop. In 9 hours, huge geological changes occurred that rewrote our understanding of how many formations occurred. Canyons formed in 5 months. Evolutionists claim that it took 100 million years to form the Grand Canyon by slow stream erosion of the Colorado River. The 700 feet deep Step Canyon and the smaller Lewitt Canyon are two canyons with creeks flowing through, which were formed by mud and pyroclastic flows in 5 months, cutting through 100 feet of rock. Little Grand Canyon of the Two-Tail River. It is 1/40th the size of the Grand Canyon and was created by a breached dam in one day. River systems formed in 9 hours. On March 19, 1982, 2 years later, a second explosion occurred. The original explosion had buried the river and highway 150 feet and cut off the river to the Pacific Ocean. It melted a large snowpack and caused a mud flow that carved out a drainage system in 9 hours, eroded the Little Grand Canyon up to 140 feet deep, and opened a path to the ocean. Spirit Lake Petrified Forest. In days, scientists observed the conditions that they claim took 50 million years and several layers of forest growth. The eruption stripped the trees and buried them upright in Spirit Lake, showing how petrified forests are formed during the next 10 years. 1 million trees were stripped of their branches and bark. Then, when they became waterlogged, they sank, and the ones with roots oriented themselves upright underwater like a forest in a random manner, not clumped together. Sedimentation quickly covered them. Since the trees were deposited at different times, their roots were at different layers, creating a stratified forest effect. Over 19,500 upright trees remain in that position today and demonstrate how the multiple layers were created with objects trapped between them by the rapid flowing turbidity currents. These are just a few out of many problems that geologists face when it comes to dating the Earth based on the idea that everything they observe today must have happened over millions or billions of years. Another example geologists use for an old Earth is the formation of coal. Geologists believe that the mass amount of coal we have today came about from a slow accumulation over millions of years. In fact, if you'll remember in our first lesson, I pointed out that Neil said that a large forest sank beneath the ground 300 million years ago, which gave us the coal we have today. If it is true that it takes millions of years for coal to form, then evolutionists would seem to have the proof they need that the Earth is millions or billions of years old. However, as I'm about to show you, the formation of coal does not prove that the Earth is millions of years old, because the worldwide flood could produce the mass quantity of coal that we have today in a short time. In order to prove this, I want to share with you several points from Wayne Jackson's article, The Record Buried in Coal. He wrote, "There are no evolutionary changes in the coal record. If coal were formed over an era of millions of years, the fossilized plant life it contained should reveal a series of evolutionary changes. Yet, as Professor Harold Clark noted, in the coal period, which was supposed to have lasted millions of years and to have submerged over and over again, the vegetation remained the same. It was practically identical over the world, and evolutionary assumptions do not seem to be very consistent with the facts." Polystrate tree trunks. There are numerous examples of tree trunks extending through several successful beds of coal with their alternating layers of sandstone or shale. This precludes the notion that these beds formed over vast ages of time. N.A. Rupke stated, "A special class of polystrate stems is constituted by stumps which extend up through a coal seam together with some layers of sandstone and sandy slate, or even through 2 or more of these coal seams, and all interbedded strata." He thus concluded the coal beds were rapidly deposited just as well as the above-mentioned inorganic sequences. Preservation of plant fossils. In all the great coal deposits, there are found the leaves and tissues of plant so exquisitely preserved that it is absurd to think of the material lying for centuries rotting in a peat bog or swamp, as the common theory involves. Near Glasgow, Scotland, for example, under a mass of boulders, an iron, man-made instrument was discovered embedded in a natural seam of coal 7 feet under the surface. One evolutionist admitted, in a vein of coal in England, there once were found a number of stones, hammers, and picks that must have belonged to men way back in the Stone Age of human history. Near Freiburg, Germany, a recent wooden railroad bridge was being replaced with steel. The wooden piles which had supported the weight were found to have turned partially into coal. This proves that coal can form within the short 100-year span of the railroad era. Rapid formation. Finally, it has been demonstrated by experiments in recent years that wood or other cellulose-type material under the proper conditions of pressure and heat can be converted into coal or coal-like products in a matter of hours. These experiments conclusively prove that the formation of coal and oil did not necessarily require millions of years or even thousands of years to form. As Dirk Eger, a militant evolutionist, conceded a few years back, the hurricane, the flood, or the tsunami may do more in an hour than the ordinary processes of nature have achieved in 1,000 years. Dr. Donald Chittick has noted that the failure to recognize the relatively rapid formation of coal and oil on the part of evolutionary scientists has seriously deterred solutions to the energy crisis that is plaguing much of the world. The coal record beneath the earth is a serious challenge to Darwin's theory of organic evolution. In addition to what Mr. Jackson wrote, we have found several things in the coal veins that are supposed to be 250 million years old that show that man was around when this coal was formed. For example, there have been human footprints preserved in these coal beds found in several different states in the USA. Of course, evolutionists try to explain the footprints away and saying that it was some other kind of creature, though they admit it looks really similar to a human footprint. A gold chain was found in the coal as well, as Bert Thompson and Brad Hare wrote. It has been reported that in 1891, a Miss Culp of Morrisville, Illinois, dropping a shovelful of coal and transferring it to her cooking range, and a large lump broke in two, disclosing a lovely little gold chain of intricate workmanship, neatly coiled and embedded. This was a 10-inch long gold chain made of 8-karat gold, found in what evolutionists would say was 250 million years old. The question becomes, who would have been around to make this necklace that long ago? Also discovered in coal was a woman's sewing thimble. In 1915, an iron pot was found in coal deposits that were dated at 300 million years old. Bert and Brad go on to point out how in 1889, a baked clay figure of a human was found while boring a well in Idaho. This clay figure was found underneath a lava sheet that was supposedly supposed to be 12 million years old. The list could go on, but I've given you enough examples to show that coal does not support the view that the earth is millions or billions of years old. It actually supports the creationist view and the worldwide flood. There's also a lot of evidence that shows that man and dinosaur were on the earth at the same time. As you would expect, evolutionists do everything in their power to dismiss this evidence, because if they accepted even one example that I'm about to share with you, they would have to admit they are wrong about evolution. First, I want to show you an Inca burial stone. This stone was engraved by the Incas long before the discovery of dinosaurs in the mid-1800s. Engraved on this stone is a Triceratops dinosaur, which is accurately portrayed in detail with a human rider mounted on its back. It would appear that the Incas or their ancestors had seen living dinosaurs. Stones like this one belong to the culture of the Incas, which dates between AD 500 to 1500. These stones depict all kinds of things, but 1/3 out of the 11,000 that one man collected depicts different kinds of dinosaurs. These stones were buried with their dead. The man who found all these stones was Dr. Javier Cabrera, Unfortunately, this same man has shed doubt on the authenticity of these stones depicting dinosaurs because he decided to fake some of them to sell them, since it's illegal to sell Peruvian antiquities. He even admitted to making fake ones, but he also said that he had real ones as well. Despite the controversy this man has created, there is other evidence that shows that these stones with dinosaurs were authentic. Consider what Bert Thompson and Brad Hare wrote. Validation of these stones come from a full understanding of their history. In the 1570s, the Indian historian and chronicler Juan de Santa Cruz Lamgui wrote about the engraved stones. He noted that conquistadors had taken some of the stones back to Spain and wrote that at the time of the Inca Pachatuti, many carved stones had been found in the kingdom of Chincha in Chinchayunga. On October 3, 1993, the OJO Lima Domingo, a major newspaper based in Lima, Peru, reported a Spanish priest traveling in the area of Inca in 1512, inquiring about the unusual stones that had strange animals carved on them. These reports verify that the stones were in existence long before those discovered by Dr. Darquea. Since that time, other investigators have had the opportunity to observe stones in Nazca tombs, as well as to inspect the entire Darquea collection. Why did they say strange animals instead of dinosaurs? Well, in the 1500s, the term dinosaur had not been coined yet. In fact, the word dinosaur was not coined until 1841. Another piece of strong evidence that shows that whoever created these images of the dinosaurs had to have seen them while they were alive comes from how some of these stones depict a Diplodocus-like dinosaur having dermal frills. Yet we did not know this about these dinosaurs until 1992, which means Dr. Darquea could not have faked them. In an article titled New Look for Sauropod Dinosaurs, paleontologist Stephen Zerkis noted, a recent discovery of a fossilized sauropod skin impression reveals a significantly different appearance for these dinosaurs. The fossilized skins demonstrates that a median row of dermal spines was present. Some are quite narrow and others are broader and more conical. There are only two possible conclusions of how these Inca Indians could have carved these dinosaurs correctly. Number one, they could have made a good guess. Or number two, they saw them with their own eyes. The fact that they drew them with any kind of accuracy proves to me that they had to have seen them with their own eyes. Another proof of this comes from the fact that at one point scientists were claiming that these carvings of dinosaurs were not accurate because they depict them as having a skin that was like bumpy rosettes. However, recent discoveries on the same continent as the Inca burial stones have shown that the sauropod dinosaur has this kind of bumpy skin. Louis Chiap and colleagues discussed sauropod dinosaurs' embryos, noting the general skin pattern consistent of round, non-overlapping, tubercle-like scales. A rosette pattern of scales is present in PVPH-130, designation for one of the specimens. When you combine all this evidence, it shows that there are authentic Inca burial stones that depict dinosaurs that had to have been seen by those who carved them because they accurately depict what these dinosaurs look like. This is the only logical explanation, but the evolutionists will continue to deny this evidence. Our next example is a fossil of a sandal print with a trilobite. The oldest fossil footprints yet found was discovered in June 1968 by William J. Meister on an expedition to Antelope Spring, 43 miles west of Delta, Utah, USA. He was accompanied by his wife and two daughters and by Mr. and Mrs. Francis Shape and their two daughters. The party had already discovered several fossils of trilobites when Meister split open a 2-inch thick slab of rock with his hammer and discovered the print. The rock fell open like a book, revealing on one side the footprint of a human with trilobites right in the footprint itself. The other half of the rock slab showed an almost perfect mold of a footprint and fossils. Amazingly, the human was wearing a sandal. The sandal that seems to have crushed a living trilobite was 10 1/4 inches long and 3.5 inches wide. The heel is indented slightly more than the sole, as a human shoe print would be. According to the theory of evolution, humans and trilobites would not have been around at the same time. In fact, as Neil pointed out, the trilobite was alive before the dinosaurs and died out before the dinosaurs came along. Yet our photo shows this is not true. Wayne Jackson talks about another example of a drawing of a dinosaur done by Indians in his article, The Havasupai Dinosaur Carvings. In 1924, Sam Hubbard took an expedition to the Havasupai Canyon. The walls of the canyon are made of red sandstone, which makes a great canvas for drawing images in. The Indians that used to be there had carved many images, including one of a dinosaur. Now please keep in mind that Dr. Hubbard was an evolutionist, but this image of a dinosaur that resembled a diplodocus really bothered him. Notice what Mr. Jackson wrote about this man. Expressing his frustration elsewhere, he declared, "The fact that some prehistoric man made a pictograph of a dinosaur on the walls of this canyon upsets completely all of our theories regarding the antiquity of man. Facts are stubborn and immutable things. If the theories do not square with the facts, then the theories must change. The facts remain." After studying the pictograph carefully and giving the matter some logical reflection, Professor Hubbard drew some rather reasonable deductions. The fact that the animal is pictured upright and balanced on its tail would seem to indicate that the artist must have seen it alive. The artist himself was not a brutish, half-human creature. He was a tool maker using an instrument to skillfully carve in the hard stone, perhaps with a flint chisel or knife. He had an artist's eye for a form and a sense of proportion. He selected a medium that would preserve his art. The carving apparently was not merely an exhibition of one's imagination, for it was clustered with other creatures, such as goats, serpents, an elephant, and several additional unidentifiable objects. Too, there were battle implements, a shield, and a spear. All this evidence points to this strange creature being real. When you consider that only a few miles away, near the edge of the Painted Desert, are fossilized dinosaur tracks, it proves that there were dinosaurs in the area that these natives could have seen with their own eyes. Brad Harrab wrote a fascinating article titled "A Dinosaur Discovered in a Mammal's Stomach." He points out how evolutionists thought that mammals evolved from reptiles. So this new discovery showed evolutionists that they were wrong once again. Notice what Brad wrote. A discovery reported in the January 13, 2005 issue of Nature challenged everything evolutionists have ever maintained regarding dinosaurs and mammals. The Associated Press reported, villagers digging in China's rich fossil beds have uncovered the preserved remains of a tiny dinosaur in the belly of a mammal, a startling discovery for scientists who have long believed early mammals couldn't possibly attack and eat a dinosaur. Not only do we now have additional proof of mammals coexisting with dinosaurs, but we also have scientific evidence of large mammals eating a dinosaur. The authors discovered the fossil remains of two different mammals. One was 50% larger than previous mammal fossils that were considered to be living with the dinosaurs and was named Repenomus giganticus. The other, Repenomus robustus, was fully intact and had a dinosaur in its stomach. This is just another piece of evidence that shows how wrong the evolutionists are about the alleged timeline of different animals. There is a lot more evidence I could give you that shows that man and dinosaur coexisted, but I just have time to show you one more in this lesson. My last example is what is known as the coffee track. In 1934, Mr. A.M. Coffee of Stinnett, Texas, a pumper for the Gulf Oil Company, discovered a trail of 9 human-like footprints in series on a rock ledge about 4 miles out of town. He worked one of the tracks loose and took it home. After he showed the artifact to a few friends, including his boss, various interested persons took the rest of the tracks from the site. The discovery created an instant controversy among archaeologists, geologists, and anthropologists because the sedimentary rock system of the entire area is geologically assigned Permian, assumed to be 225 million years old. The general consensus was that the print had to be a carving made by Indians or the like. The difficulties involved in drawing such a conclusion were enhanced by the fact that the print was accompanied by 8 other prints in the series, along with an adjacent child's print. Further controversy ensued when it was pointed out that the tracks were not stylized as other Indian carvings were. These footprints have been analyzed by a CT scan and have been deemed authentic footprints and not carved ones. So once again, we have another example that shows that man existed at the same time as the other animals that supposedly lived 225 million years ago. As we have seen in this lesson, there is one problem after another with the geological column that does not support evolution. Instead, the real geological column supports the biblical account of creation. We have also seen the fossil record completely refutes evolution, but supports the creation account of the Bible. We have also seen a great deal of evidence that shows that man and dinosaur coexisted. I hope the information I have shared with you has been helpful and that you can use it to teach others.